disruptive.
America that I fought.
Weird thing to happen. So you may have heard of this guy, Rabbi Shmuley, whatever how to pronounce the last name. Some have called him Daddy Dildo because known connections of him and his daughter selling, I kid you not, sex toys. They have a sex toy industry in Israel. But he's also very, very convincingly telling people how important he's a fighter for, the genocide in Israel. And he is doing due diligence by making media rounds, including what he said recently by stating that for every Israeli that dies in this war, it is more catastrophic to the Americas. And we should care so much to send all of our tax dollars and all of our resources while we're crumbling our own nation, because every Israeli is about 10 times more important than anywhere else in the world. And this is not even hyperbole. This is what he said.
The United States use precision bombing. That's exactly what Israel does, because Israel is like the United States. We are a moral nation, which is why so many hundreds of soldiers. Remember, every time Israel loses one soldier, that's the United States losing 35 soldiers. For
every time Israel loses one soldier, America loses 35. This is just a round base number. By the way, I love how they're sharing the fact that, we're just such great friends. I mean, we use the same precision bombs. That makes us good allies, right? It's good to know that we finally understand why exactly we're allies with the nation. We use the same precision bombs to kill people. Yay! Slaughtering is great, especially with friends. This is the supposed moral representation of the state of Israel, and why we have to, again, extract all of our resources, just like we did with Ukraine and still doing with Ukraine. Send all of our resources to have a mass slaughter of innocent civilians overseas that had really nothing to do with any of us back home.
On October 7th, Israel lost the equivalent of 60,000 Americans slaughtered in a day. What would the United States have done? Look at what we did. These are made up numbers.
Those are all made up numbers. October 7th, like 60,000 Americans are slaughtered on that day. That's like, so actually Israeli citizens, but I don't have an actual estimate because I don't have the actual investigation. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. And we use precision bombs. So we're smart that way. I can't believe people actually take this guy seriously. Just the way he's announcing this, the tone and the precision that he's announcing this is so hysterical. It's so hysterical. For every Israeli that dies, there's always 35 Americans that die with it. Wow. And he's supposed to be the moral high ground. It's such a moral society there in Israel. According to him, according to RFK Jr., it's such a peaceful, holy land. They're the chosen people. God loves one and all. And because he loves one and all, he wants one particular group of people to slaughter the rest of civilization. Yay! It's one of those things that I questioned once in Sunday school, and I got beaten because, we love each other. It's so peaceful. Very peaceful religious, takes. So, that leads, again, I just want to show this is supposed to be the moral high ground. People are, raising him up to be this moral superior, to defend why Israel is doing basically a slaughtering of Palestine, while they're wiping Palestine off the map. And he's supposed to be, this moral, courageous guy and this warrior caring for people. Well, watch what he does on the side here. This is what, your tax dollars are paying for this guy to do. So your tax dollars are paying for a grown-ass man to do stripper moves in front of children. I just want people to be aware of that. That man who told you that, well, for every one Israeli, there's at least 35 Americans that died, so all the people that died on October 7th, it's like 60,000 Americans. If only we had some sort of, base mathematical formula to calculate it. That is supposed moral superior that is in charge of doing the media rounds to make us feel so sympathetic of why Israel needs to massively slaughter innocent lives, young children, mothers, daughters that were nowhere in part of Hamas or October 7th or the Holocaust or any sort of exploitive reason that they try to use to convince you. Any sort of derogatory reasoning. They're mass slaughtering people, regardless. Here's even Jackson Hinkle. Jackson Hinkle has been very vocal about Israel and Gaza, to the point that he got banned on majority of social media platforms. He says Israel let Rabbi Shmuley run the official Israeli X account, and they're committing a genocide. Embarrassing. So that is the face. Again, this is how serious they are. How serious they are. This is in charge of the entire account of Israel on X. That face, this grown-ass man wearing that to try to go after Candace Owens. That's why he made himself look like a, pathetic schmuck like that. It's to try to go after Candace Owens. Somehow this is gonna, smack her down and rule over her. And that is in charge of running the Israeli X account while they're committing a genocide. And we're supposed to feel morally sympathetic towards someone like him announcing that we need to mass slaughter an entire population. Because, America and Israel are just alike, right? That's why we're such great allies. Great killers think alike. So, here's also to bring to awareness to. System Update with Glenn Greenwald pointed this out. So, he did an interview with John Mearsheimer. And this is the professor that actually predicted what would happen with Russia and Ukraine. This is the guy who said in 2015 that if we advance more into Ukraine and allow NATO to expand into those territories, Russia's going to retaliate. They're going to be angry, and there's going to be warfare. And guess what? In February of 2022, it all rolled out. So this guy may know a thing or two about war. This guy may know a thing or two about the tensions that lead into warfare. And here's what he's about to say about Israel committing its genocide and how they're just able to get away with it.
I want to focus instead on the decision by the Israelis to bomb the Iranian embassy in Damascus, which killed 7 senior Iranian military officials. Obviously, attacking an embassy is something that almost no country is willing to do under any circumstances. We went over some examples last night. Obviously, the U.S. desperately wanted to get Julian Assange, claiming that he was harming national security while he was in the Ecuadorian embassy, but respected the sovereignty of Ecuador, did not invade the embassy. In 1984, there were Libyans inside the Libyan embassy in London who were shooting protesters on the street, anti-Libyan protesters. They were using the embassy as a shooting base, and the British did not invade that embassy for the same reason. This is kind of a sacrosanct principle. Now, Israel's excuse, as always, was, oh, well, there were terrorists there. They were using the embassy as a military staging ground and the like. This is Israel's excuse for everything that it does. But what do you make of the implications for international law and the possibility of escalation from this attack on Iran's embassy?
Well, I think it points up very nicely that Israel is basically out of control. I think when you marry this with what happened with regard to the bombing of the humanitarian food aid convoy in Gaza, you see that there are really no limits to what the Israelis will do. They think they're just free to do pretty much whatever they want. This is, I think, here we're talking mainly about the bombing of the Iranian consulate in Damascus. I think this is a huge blow to the rule-based international order that the United States prizes so much. I mean, the Israelis behave like rogues, and the United States defends them at every turn, as you pointed out. This is not good for the United States. It's certainly not good for international politics in general. I'm not sure what the Israelis are up to. It's kind of difficult to figure out exactly what their motive is. I think one could argue that they're desperate and they're lashing out. Things are not going well in Gaza. Things are not going well with Hezbollah. There's just a lot of bad news confronting the Israelis. And one could argue that they're just upping the ante to try to get themselves out of this mess. It also may be the case that they want to drag the United States into the war. And they want to get the United States in a war with Iran. That's been a long-time objective of the Israeli foreign policy establishment. And one could argue that's what's going on here. But regardless, it is certainly not good for the.
Again, great mind, great killers think alike. Because what he's saying there is pretty much almost verbatim what we could say about the United States. Like, they're out of control. And while the United States pretends to, you know, be the enforcer of good ethics and good values around the world, like they smear and attack, Libya or any other nation for what they're doing to their people. How dare we do this? How dare we, they're not good people over there. While we're sending military bases around the world to install and act terrorist groups to basically rise up warfare, rise up the war on terror, and manufacture the terror so we can have a war on terror, and oppress more people around the world. We are the terrorist state. And Israel is the terrorist state. They go hand in hand. And the CIA and the Mossad go hand in hand when it comes to intelligence. And they go and blackmail the rest of the world to do its due diligence, to do whatever it wants to do. So I feel like that's partly the reason why they're able to do this. The other part of this, too, is that the international courts that every single nation has been a part of, and every single time, for example, Russia gets mentioned about its potential war crimes, how it needs to be held account for the international court by the United States. Guess who's not part of that international court? The United States and Israel. For obvious reasons. Very, very obvious reasons. So it's amazing that they could claim themselves as the moral superior, but not actually take responsibility for their own hands. They're the moral superior. They know what's going on, and they have to do exactly what is chosen by, God, or chosen by its people to commit a genocide. And they're just able to get away with it. But again, any other nation outside of that, they would be held account. They'd be held criminally prosecuted. There'd be high international courts. There would be huge amount of tension for any other nation. The United States is allowed to do it. Israel's allowed to do it, and they go hand in hand. That's why they're such great allies. And they mentioned about humanitarian aid that got bombed. This is an article here. This is just recently, April 2nd. IDF chief apologizes for unintentionally killing. Love how they changed that. Unintentionally killing of World Central KitchenAid workers. Like, oh, I feel bad afterwards. I didn't mean to actually slaughter people responsible for feeding individuals in warfare. I didn't exactly mean to do that. I just happened to walk into this kitchen that I knew was a kitchen that was feeding war refugees, and I just fired. Again, just like how the United States. And then we find out years later that through Julian Assange, through Chelsea Manning, that we were slaughtering innocent civilians. We were doing double taps, which is when you kill someone and then kill the medic that's trying to treat them. And that is illegal. That is illegal on international court system. But they don't care. They don't care. Why? Because they can blackmail anybody to do anything that they want to do. They can blackmail to the highest order. They were tapping into Angela Merkel's phone, for God's sakes. They got dirt on every single nation and every single leader. This is a globalist ploy to expand warfare, to manufacture the war machine. And just like how Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us, the military-industrial complex sees no bounds. They have no boundaries. And we just allowed it to continue on and fester for so many decades to allow for this to continue on. It's been a manufactured effort since day one. And here's also, this is interesting take. This is from an old educational video. I don't know exactly what the name of it is, but someone sent this to me. And they're about to explain the kind of objective that supposedly Zionists are trying to do in the regards of this genocide. That there's supposedly a purpose to this, not just the fact that, hey, we feel like killing today, so let's just go next door and slaughter and massacre anybody. This is supposedly the objective that they have.
We had several other people in the country, even among the Jews, the Zionists particularly, who were against anything that was to be done if they couldn't have the whole of Palestine and everything handed to them on a silver plate so they wouldn't have to do anything. It couldn't be done. We had to take it in small doses. You can't move 5 or 6 million people out of a country and fill it up with 5 or 6 million more and expect both sets of them to be pleased. We had all sorts of objections to everything that was done. Something had to be done. We went ahead and done it and had it done, and now it's working out. Eventually, I think we'll have them all satisfied, but it's going to take a great deal of time yet to get the job done.
Going to take a great deal of time to get the job done. And what job was that? That job was to annex an already established country, throw a bunch of people in there, and then get those people rallied against each other instead of having a simple solution, a diplomatic solution, having them getting riled up by their governments, by their military forces, by intelligence crews, by the United States, by the CIA, rile them up so they can massacre each other. That's what this is really about. This is nothing to do with anything they say about Holocaust, anything to do with the Jewish faith. Is purely manufactured by the highest order to deliberately brainwash and manipulate people to massacre each other. This has been going on for decades. Decades. This is not just a simple retaliation of what happened on October 7th. October 7th was the scenario that they had to pull out so that they're allowed to do stuff like this. So they're allowed to continue massacring more. They needed an October 7th to happen to allow for this warfare to go on. Just like how we needed basically 9/11 to start war on terror. We needed some sort of scenario to freak the minds of people, get people so paranoid to restrict people from their basic rights here in America, here in the United States, and Canada, and all around the world. Restrict them of their basic rights to fight against terror. terror that they have orchestrated and they created. Like I said, this has been a manufactured ploy since day one. And all it takes is for people to look at the signs carefully, look at all the visible signs, and realize that this is all pulled out together. People will scream at you at the top of their lungs that this is Hamas, 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 Hamas did this, Hamas did that, Hamas did that. Hamas is just evil people. All the Palestinians should support Hamas. Where exactly did Hamas come from? Ask the next time a Zionist or pro-genocide person tries to bait you with that. Ask them that. Where did Hamas originate from? Who is funding Hamas? Where did they get the weaponry and the money to establish themselves as a political dominance in Palestine? It was all done by Israel. It was all done by Mossad. It was Netanyahu that encouraged his own government to pledge for Hamas so that they can manufacture this terror, manufacture a terrorist group so they would have to fight their own creation and oppress everybody in sight. It has been a game. It has been a sham. It has been exploitive since day goddamn one. And if you really, really, really are someone that wants to stop this war from continuing on, stop the massacre, stop the genocide, then we need to call out the people that are manufacturing it. We need to call out the top heads that allowed this to happen. We need to personally vindict Netanyahu, Joe Biden, the United States White House, the CIA, the Mossad, and AIPAC for manufacturing a stunt like October 7th that costs the lives of people to allow for their advancement of their agenda for more warfare. That's what I mean when I call for a ceasefire. It's not to personally choose a country over another country. It's saying that we need to stop this in its track, and we need to stop the creation of this war and find peace and prosperity away from the evil oligarchy, the bloodsuckers that are leading us into tragedy every single day. Just like with Ukraine and Russia, like any other country that we have invaded or over 20 years and furthermore.